Wizards of the Coast has a DM problem, and I want to talk about it today on Greyhawk Grognard. So there's actually two components to what I want to talk about today. The first is that there are a lot more players than there are DMs. And that should be obvious, right? Because for every DM, you're going to have anywhere between 3 and 8 players at a table. And the problem is that most of the books that a game company publishes, an RPG company publishes, are going to be aimed at dungeon masters or referees or whatever you call them. And that's because, they're the ones who buy the adventures. So once you've bought the rules and, the players only need the one rule book, ideally. And it's the dungeon masters who need to buy the DM's guide and the monster manual and all the adventures and all that other good stuff. The players just need the player's handbook. And that turns into a problem economically. And the reason that's a problem, obviously, is because you're only going to sell 1/6 as many of the other books as you are. No, sorry, you're going to sell 1/6 as many of the DM's books as you are of the other books for the players. And if you're a company that makes its living publishing books, you want to try to aim books at the larger number, right? You want to get the players as well as the DMs rather than just the DMs. And Wizards of the Coast is running into this problem, just like TSR did before it. It's just a truism of the industry and the hobby is that there's more players than dungeon masters. And so they're running into the problem of how do we make books that appeal to both GMs and players without there becoming an enormous glut of extraneous rules. 3.5 ran into that problem where there were just endless splat books. Second edition also had that problem where there were just endless splat books. They tried to um, set out the brown books, right? The complete guide to dwarves, the complete guide to necromancers, complete guide to fighters, and so on. And it ended up being a lot of rules bloat, and a lot of it didn't work right because they were pumping out so many books that they couldn't play test it all properly, especially in conjunction with the other things. So it ran into a ton of problems. And WotC is having the same problem because you can only sell so many adventure paths which appeal to DMs and not players. You want to get the players going, but you don't want to have just endless new rules and new players guides and stuff like that. So they're in a bit of a quandary, and it's going to be interesting to see how they fare. Hi everybody. Please help me keep Greyhawk alive by liking this video and subscribing. It really does help. You can also become a member of the channel or support me on Patreon and get early access to my videos, exclusive content, free or at-cost copies of my Greyheim Adventures modules, and more. Thanks, and now back to the show. Now, the second thing is that being a DM is not easy, and the Dungeon Master is the most important player in the game. If a group of players get together, they've never played before, they get together and they have a crappy Dungeon Master, it is entirely possible those people will never come back to the game. And that is enormously problematic for Wizards of the Coast because their whole business model will get upended if there are a sea of awful dungeon masters out there turning players off the game. The thing is, they haven't done squat about it. At least back in the day, TSR had the RPGA, and part of the RPGA's raison d'etre was to improve the caliber of play, at least at conventions. And the theory is, that'll spread out to other things. But Wizards of the Coast doesn't have that, right? They shut down the RPGA, and they shut down the living campaigns and all that good stuff. And now there's really no official way to learn how to be a DM. You can read the stuff in the Dungeon Master's Guide. There's some good advice there, even in the 2024 DM's Guide. There's some decent advice on how to be a DM, but that is not nearly the same as having some sort of official program that Wizards of the Coast could administer on how to be a good DM, how to be a good first time DM, and bad DMs come in all different flavors, right? There's DMs that don't know the rules. There's DMs who are just personally obnoxious. There's DMs who interject their own personal peccadillos into the game. There's DMs who aren't very good at enunciating combat or travel or anything like that. There's a number. A DM with terrible social skills is not likely to be a good DM in a general sense. Obviously there's exceptions, and as you DM more, you get better at it. That is definitely the case. I think all of us who became dungeon masters back in the day, that's how we started, that's how we learned. And we turned out okay. But that was a different time when it was kind of expected that a DM would be kind of rough around the edges, and it was somebody that you knew, so you didn't mind all that much. And conventions, it's catch as catch can, and it was kind of part of the milieu back then. But nowadays, every DM is being compared to Matt Mercer or whoever else they're watching on YouTube. Your players are watching, who are who've been doing this a long time, or they're doing it professionally, and everything is scripted, and everything, they have semi-professional actors and comedians doing the players, and it's a much more staged performance that you're watching, even though it might be a real game legitimately. These are not off the street everyday players, and they have a lot more production values, and DMs are going to get compared against that. It's the Mercer effect that we've talked about it for years. And but I think it really especially impacts this DM problem, because if there are crappy DMs out there, or even if they're decent DMs who aren't matching the expectations of the players, you're going to see this problem. And honestly, Wizards of the Coast doesn't seem interested in solving this problem. Even though it is one of the most fundamental issues that could affect their bottom line, because a bad DM, as I say, is going to potentially turn off future players, then it's surprising to me that there's no sort of support network, nothing the equivalent of Wizards of the RPGA back in the day. Not even on their official channel. They have a YouTube channel. They have an X account. They have all the social media stuff that most companies have, and they don't really go out of their way to give any kind of advice or support or anything for the dungeon masters. And that honestly, that surprises me. And I would not be surprised if at some point in the future, because they do seem to be, if not righting the ship, at least they're nudging it in the right direction. I wouldn't be a bit surprised if they didn't do something along those lines, where they have, some sort of mentorship, even if it's a YouTube channel, where people, experienced dungeon masters can give advice and so forth. I have some of this on my channel. Joe and Eric have it on theirs. There's a zillion YouTube channels out there, especially the ones that sprang up over COVID, which are now, a lot of them are fleeing or transforming, as we talked about in the other video. But I would not be surprised if Wizards of the Coast doesn't do something to address this gap, because it is potentially crippling for them, and no new rule sets are going to change and fix that one fundamental problem, that a bad DM is going to turn off your players, and your players are your customers. So anyway, there it is. My thoughts on the DM problem that is faced by Wizards of the Coast. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Please do let me know. Sound off in the comments if I'm right or if I'm wrong. And I'd love to hear from you. I hope you're all having a wonderful, wonderful day, and stay safe from Pinkertons.
Thanks for watching today's video. Please remember to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. Below you'll find links to my Patreon, which helps make these videos possible. You'll also find the web store where you can buy my books, and my blog where you'll find all sorts of free downloads and other articles. Thanks, and have a great day.